very pleased that we've been able to bring this, and we'll be back again with you in August. With respect, we acknowledge the Nevada County campus of Sierra College as the traditional and unceded homelands of the Nisenan peoples. For countless generations, the Nisenan have carried out their responsibility as stewards of this place, originally known as DASPA. Sierra College commits to an ongoing relationship with the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe and their future generations, who are an integral part of the Sierra College community. I'd like to just take a few minutes to tell you about the foundation and the council and what we do here in Nevada County. The council is made up of staff and community members, and we are responsible for supporting the students and programs of NCC. We put about $20,000 each year into the campus, and we sponsor things like the art show, the student art show. So when you leave, could you go out that way and see the fabulous art show? We do a 7th grade day where we bring students here to the campus so they can see that in a very short time they can go to college in their backyard. And we're also planning to have an activity with Silver Springs for this year, bringing those students on campus and showing them that there are no barriers to their education. We sponsor the lecture series, and we are creating an alumni association in addition. We sponsor a food pantry for those students who are food insecure. We have an emergency fund for students. If there's something that's preventing them from coming to school, we will help them with that barrier. So last month, I talked to you about a new fundraiser we're having, because if we're putting that money in, we have to raise funds. And last month it was called Friday Family Food Truck Fun Fest. But, and I did it right, but after a discussion with marketing, it will be called the Family Fun Fest. So it will be July 11th from 5 to 8 p.m. It'll be free admission and free parking up on the campus, and we'll have food trucks, we'll have games and activities for kids with buying tickets, and we'll have some gift basket drawings. So I have some information over there if any of you would like to sponsor that event, but I hope, and you'll hear more about it, I hope you'll be able to bring your families. So if you haven't seen some of our forums, we actually have them online. And this one, as you can see, Chris comes here from Rockland to film these for us. And if you go to our website, www.sierracollege.edu/NCC, you will see these community forums if you've missed any. They are on there, in addition to our anti-human trafficking forum that was done in cooperation with Seroptimus International Grass Valley. So enjoy the forum, and we'll see you in August.
What's the date for the August?
For the August
29th.
29th. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Okay, we tried, this was one, the date is different. We usually are on the 3rd Friday, but because of graduation, we couldn't do it, so we had to move it up because our graduation is the 3rd week. So enjoy the forum.
Thank you, Judy. Is this on? Okay. Last month I didn't turn it on. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lorraine Jewett. I'm honored to be your moderator today. And today we're talking about food insecurity. Going to find out what that's all about from the executive directors of the 2 largest food distribution organizations for Nevada County residents experiencing food insecurity. Phil Alonso, Executive Director of Interfaith Food Ministry, and Julie Thornburg, Executive Director of the Food Bank of Nevada County. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. So very briefly, let's just talk about food insecurity. If we're going to use that word, we should explain what it is, but perhaps there's another word that you use. Websites say limited or uncertain access to adequate food. The effects of such are both physical and mental, pretty serious for children. They can suffer learning disabilities, health, developmental problems, adults. We could get into this. I don't know why obesity is listed as one of the health effects of food insecurity. Chronic illness, anxiety, and depression. What are your definitions of that term, and how do you see it manifested?
Okay.
I will be happy to go first if
Thanks,
you like. Yes, thank you all for having us, and thank you all for being here, everybody, to show that you care about this really important issue and care about our neighbors. So I like to think of hunger and food insecurity. Hunger is that immediate need, right? That immediate feel of hunger. Okay, I'm hungry. We all might experience that throughout the day or things like that. But, you know, that is that immediate feeling of just needing nutrition in your body. Food insecurity is the longer term, you know, impacts of that, and having that, you know, it's almost like a lifestyle in a way of, not by choice, but that impacts every aspect of who you are and what you're doing and what you're thinking about each day. Food insecurity, really not knowing where your next meals are going to come from, or not at the end of every month consistently running out of money for food, and having to turn to services and sources of free food. And so that longer term food insecurity, I see as really defined as that, you know, that it's really, it impacts, you know, everybody from children to adults to older adults and every walk of life. And I think that's part of the misconception out there, is that it only affects homeless people, it only affects a small percentage of our population. And the reality is that it's sort of hidden from view for a lot of people, and a lot of people don't see it, perhaps haven't experienced it, and that's what we're, you know, here to try to raise awareness about and try to serve both that immediate need of hunger with distributing free supplemental food, and also do other things, which we'll get into, to address that longer term food insecurity.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, Julie?
Yeah, thank you. I agree 100%. That is definitely what it is. I think in general people don't realize, I think the difference between one of the things with hunger and food insecurity is that hunger is foundational. That is the actual foundation of everything we do, that humans do. And so like Phil said, you cannot be concerned about paying your PG&E bill, you can't get to work, you can't concentrate in school if you are hungry. And so I think that's a very important thing. Other things you're able to address after your basic needs, your basic human needs. Hunger is your basic human need. Housing is after that. School is after that. Even the money you're going to need to purchase your next meal is after that. And so that's what makes it so important, and that's what makes it so important that we do it every day and that it's available everywhere, and why it takes so many different resources to be able to fill that need. And so I think that's really important. Food insecurity is not knowing where your next meal comes from. It doesn't, a huge portion of our county, it's not at the end of the month when they're worried about it. A large portion of our county, and the majority of the people we serve, that's from the beginning of the month. They know they're not going to have enough to pay their bills or to get their medication and buy food. And so that's at the beginning of the month. Everyone isn't on the end of the month on the 27th saying, hey, oh boy, we're cutting it really close this month. That's where the food insecurity comes. That means they've known that entire time, and it's very hard to do other things if that is where you're at starting the month, where you don't have food. Food is also one of the few things that in a budget that people can, that budget for them can change, meaning You can choose not to go to the grocery store or possibly find a service that can help you, but you can't choose not to use your medication or purchase your medication. You can't choose not to put fuel in your car and pay those high rates because you need to get to work to be able to pay, all those other bills or have a chance at getting food. And so that's what I think food insecurity is. It's much larger than actually just being hungry that day. And then the majority of the families, they're taking that on not just for themselves singularly, they're taking that on for their entire family. And so it's a big burden to carry. And I would also like to just quickly point, she said obesity, I wasn't sure why that was on the list. Obesity's on the list because inexpensive, unhealthy food is the cheapest. Inexpensive, unhealthy food a lot of times is what gets donated the most. And so that is what they have access to. Inexpensive, unhealthy food is also that lasts the longest. It's non-perishable. And so that's why, and same with health problems. You can't eat healthy and fresh produce or some of those other supplements that you may need, to help your health or even to help a medical condition when you're food insecure. You're just looking to get the most that you can for what little bit you have.
Thank you both. We're going to take a deep dive into federal and state cuts and how those are affecting your programs. But first, I'd like everyone to know what each of you do, so if we could get into that. The scope of services, I'm thinking the structure of your organization, such as board of directors, number of staff, number of volunteers, number of clients, and their demographics. Who wants to start?
That's really big. There's a lot of questions in one.
Well, you're just describing your program. That's basically, I would hope.
So our program is, we're the Food Bank of Nevada County, and so we are the federally designated food bank for the county. That comes with USDA commodities and federal funding, and we operate directly at the state level with the state to disperse those commodities and food and funding. And so our main purpose is to provide food support to the entire county. And so it's to provide food access where the need is at. So we have currently 7 vehicles, 3 warehouses, and 7 employees currently, and so very understaffed. And what we do with that is we procure the food, receive the commodities when we're able to get them, and we take food out to all corners of the county. North San Juan, Washington, Penn Valley, down to Higgins by LOP and in the greater Grass Valley area. And so that's 50% of what we do, which is direct distribution. The other 50% of what we do is support the other nonprofits in our county that food is one of their main support resources that they provide as well. And so that can include Hospitality House, Salvation Army, IFM. And so we give food to those organizations who are also providing food support so that we're able to meet people exactly where they're at, and we want it to make it as easy as possible for them to have access to the food that they need, so they're not paying fuel, so they're not having to wait 3 hours in a line, so they have to miss work. And so that's our main goal and main focus. Sorry, how many other questions?
It was just basically a number of volunteers. You said you're short-staffed, so hopefully you have some help from volunteers. And the clients you serve, numbers and demographics.
Okay. Number of volunteers, we always have well over 100 active volunteers, and so total volunteers is in the hundreds. In a given week, we can hit 100 volunteers pretty easily. So because we use volunteers for driving our big trucks, to making the smaller deliveries, to at distribution, packing food, all sorts of different programs we have, home delivery, summer lunch, all these different things. So we use a lot of volunteers, people who bake so that we can do fundraising, fundraisers, and so we can use all skill sets, really. Any interest, we would appreciate the help and the contribution, definitely. As far as the people we serve everyone. Anyone, you would not recognize the people we serve, or maybe just the exact opposite. You would. It's your neighbor, it's children's teachers, it's your car mechanic. It's almost 1 in 3 families qualify for our services in Nevada County. 1 in 3 families. Through all of our programs, we serve over 16,000 individuals a month through all of our programs. Through direct distribution, we feed anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 households per month. And so the demographic is young children. We do school snacks, public school snacks for the in conjunction with the free lunches. So we do the school, public school free snacks all the way to, we have an elderly and disabled home delivery program, and we deliver to them directly, and everything in between. Almost 40% of the people who use our direct distribution are working families. So it's not because they're staying at home, trying to get free food, or maybe even for people who can't work, but it's working families, so it's everyone is part of the demographic of who can fall into this needing these services.
Thank you, Julie. Bill, tell us a little bit about Interfaith Food Ministry.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. Interfaith Food Ministry, so it's interfaith because it was started by several different churches and faith congregations that in the 1980s came together and realized they could do more working together than each doing their own little food closet at their individual churches. So there was 2 or 3 or 4 that sort of first started, and it grew and grew and added on, and now we have 15 different local faith congregations, and 1 representative from each of those congregations is a representative on our board. And then we also have our board officers and executive committee, and then we have a food committee, and so that's sort of our leadership structure. We have 5 staff, 2 full-time and 3 part-time. I definitely know about being a little bit understaffed, but we have amazing volunteers that are really the driving force behind what we do. So I think at last count we had 350 active volunteers on our roster. Sometimes some of those folks are volunteering just a couple times a year, maybe during the holidays. Several of those folks are in multiple days a week. So you kind of have the whole range of how often people are doing it. And we'll probably get into what we might need or how to get involved later, but we always need volunteers. So, but I can talk more about that later. Let's see, the scope of our services and what we really do. So we're a food distribution program. We like to say that we are providing free supplemental groceries. We try to provide wholesome food, right? Nutritious food. We try to make, smart decisions about what we're providing. But there are also times where we're just rescuing food that otherwise would have been thrown away. And so, some of that pastry goods with high sugar content is going out to families, right? But we don't want that stuff to get thrown away, and we don't purchase that stuff. But so we make purchasing decisions, and maybe I'll get into more about food sources at another question possibly, but we like to, we have a variety of food sources to first bring the food in. But our main program is our food distribution program. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, 10 to 1 is our when we're open, distributing food to the public. And what's nice about that model is so many frequent food distributions, we never have food in our building for long, right? Where we get it in and we're turning it out that day or the next day. And so we ask our client families to come every other week. So we have a system that tracks their visits when they come in, and they have a family account, and we have their information. And that allows us to keep real close track and count. So we have really great data. And so a lot of our, we get a lot of grants and things, and so grant proposals are strong with strong data. The county really likes us. We can provide data to the county. And so we're tracking those visits, and so families can come every other week, about an average of anywhere from 600 to 700 plus families a week. And so every 2 weeks, right, that way you know those are different families. And so anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 families, and our average family size is about 2.5. So if you times that by 2.5, right? So we're up to 3,000, 4,000 to 5,000 individuals that we're serving about every 2 weeks. And then we do extras during the holidays. So try to go above and beyond to provide a little bit extra, but that is our main programming. But then also similar to the food bank, we also provide food to other partner agencies. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, the days when we're not open to the public, but we have volunteers and we're receiving food and we're unpacking pallets of food and things, we have partner agencies that will come in. So the hospitality house chef comes and shops at our spot first, will usually, right, and then they'll be able to go to their other food sources and fill in the other ingredients that they need for cooking in their kitchen for their shelter residents. Bright Futures for Youth, Gold Country Seniors, so a lot of these other big nonprofits that are serving a certain demographic, and food or nutrition is a big part of their program. So we're serving those folks too. We have a big partnership with United Way that reaches out to many schools. And so we're providing bags of food, and some schools have set up a classroom that has shelves, pantry shelves of food, and students can actually come in and shop. And that has been very empowering for them. I've heard really great stories about that, and now that student feels like they're, can bring home ingredients to cook a meal, and a lot of times they'll have a recipe with it, and they can feel like they're contributing to their family and helping in that way. So, but our main meat and potatoes of our program is really that direct food distribution to our families in need. And again, that's our main approach to attacking that immediate problem of hunger. And just to say a quick minute about, we're trying to also go above and beyond that and provide things that will get at that longer term food insecurity situation that families are facing. And we really believe education is one of the #1 ways to do that, right? Because again, you could have all the money in the world, but if you have no idea how to go about accessing food, if you have no idea how to prepare food for yourself, or you're physically limited in being able to do that, those are other things that can have someone to be food insecure, right? Not just low income. So that's important, I think, for people to understand and realize. And so we try to provide, make it accessible, provide education, provide recipes, and we have a regular newsletter that goes out. We've dabbled in doing some cooking classes here and there. We've had some success, some not so well attended, so we're still trying to figure out how to do that. We had a grant to do some tastings and so we would provide some little samplings and tastings through our food distribution line. So let's see, scope of services, staff, leadership, volunteers, clients.
I think you covered it.
One quick thing I want to say about demographics that we found interesting was that it tended to be, let me make sure I get this right, 25% children, 50% adults, and 25% seniors. That was pretty consistent. When COVID hit, children stayed the same, 25, adults went down to 45%, and seniors went up to 30%. So that was a demographic that with COVID 5 years ago now, we saw that shoot up. And so that was a bit interesting. And then another thing to echo some of what Julie was saying is that only 7-8% of our overall clients are without a permanent address, right? Because we ask for proof of an address to make sure they have a cooking facility and all that. And if they don't have that, and they're considered homeless, or what we call specialty bag. So we still provide food to those folks, but it's food that's ready to eat and doesn't need cooking, right? And so we're trying to be thoughtful, again, about serving that demographic. But a lot of folks will ask me, it must be like half the people that come to you are the people that you see that are homeless out in the street. And no, that's not true. It's 7-8%. And so it's a lot of working families. It's a lot of seniors on fixed income. And it's a lot of people that just come to us. We also have stats on a surprising proportion, like 50% or so, only come 3 or 4 times in the year. to our services, indicating that they probably come during the holiday time when we're providing some extra things and maybe they're in extra need or trying to scrimp and save every penny so they can buy their kid a Christmas present. And to, rather than those folks, it's really a smaller proportion that come every single time that they're eligible to come, every other week. And so that, I think, is another thing that shows people access the services when they need it. And there is certainly going to be abuse, and people will try to get extra visits and get extra food but I also see that as a side effect of that food insecurity mentality of they may not know when their next meal is coming from weeks later. They don't know when they're going to be able to get back to the food bank or to IFM. And so they are trying to game the system and get, maybe more than their share that day. But that's because that's their mentality and that's how they've learned how to have to survive. So again, while we try to have these rules about how often people can come and, we have distribution rates about, a larger family will get 2 jars of peanut butter and a smaller family will get 1 jar, things like that. We do find people trying to, maybe come more often than they're eligible, and we'll politely, turn them away or remind them that they have to come next week or whatever the case may be. But really, I think that has led to us just, again, being consistent for people and being always there, and people can rely on us, and we've had the same days and hours for a long time, and so I think that consistency is important for people that are living in scarcity, because they don't know. There's so much uncertainty for them that they're not sure. So having those consistent programs, I think, is so important, physically and that mentally of mental health wise.
Thank you. Briefly, is there an overlap in your clientele? Does it matter? Do you check? Do you care?
Absolutely. I would say we don't really care, honestly. We're just trying to serve anyone who comes to our doors as best we can. I do remember a few years ago now, we did a client survey and we asked what other resources you were serving, and I think we was about between 30 and 40% of people who responded to that survey for us said they were also going to the food bank regularly. And so there's a number for you, but I'm sure it fluctuates, and again, I think we're slightly different models and slightly different food sources and funding sources and things, which again I think is important to have in a community, because as we're learning, and sorry for the food puns, but you shouldn't have all your eggs in one basket, because when one of those drops, then you should have other baskets of eggs, as backup. And so I think that's valuable, that there's more than just one agency, and there are multiple agencies that are concerned about food and nutrition. So.
Just to add to your analogy, actually the eggs was perfect, or when eggs become skyrocket or no longer on the shelf,
right.
Then you need to have other resources, and so, but absolutely, we don't, we did a survey, but we don't turn anyone down or away. And we hope that they are able to, that we're able to meet their need every time they need it, be it weekly or through another partner source or whatever.
Thank you. Let's talk about the finances now. Part of the reason we're doing this forum this month is because of cuts at the federal and the state level. You've also told me in private interviews that donations are decreasing. So let's talk about what percentage of your revenues, what's the total budget? I'm sure you spend most of it because I've looked at your tax filings. But what percentage comes from federal, state, individual donations, and your own fundraising? Give us a picture, a financial picture, if you will.
Okay. Cool, I got some numbers here that I got ready. So one way to look at it is sort of our type of revenue that's directly like in our line items in our revenue side of our budget. And so about half of our fundraising, of our revenue, comes directly from our fundraising efforts, mailing campaigns, fundraising events, things of that nature, which are also essentially donations from the community, but that's like in response to us doing a direct, fundraising effort. So about 50% of our
what?
our annual budget is about $1 million. In
What
round
about
numbers, it's about $1 million. And that's grown, I mean, 5, 6, I started 7 years ago now, and the annual budget was more like $600,000. And so we've definitely grown over the last few years as the need has increased. And so about half of it, so about 500,000 in fundraisers, mailing campaigns, about 20%, 200,000 in grants, another 20% from individual donations from the community, and that's just throughout the year. And then 10% is sort of everything else, which is like business contributions, especially the grocery stores, but other local businesses. And then we have a couple small contracts here and there, like with the county, what we call fee for service. So we have a CalFresh contract with them where we will do outreach services to help people sign up for CalFresh food stamps, and the county pays one of our staff time to do that. And then as far as the sort of direct, well, let me finish that off then sort of on the expenses side, if you're a budget person. So we had our revenue side. On the expenses side, and we do tend to spend, in the last couple of years we actually spent more than we were able to bring in. So this year we did have to tighten our belts a little bit, but our expenses going out, also $1 million, is about 20% to staff, 30% to operations, and then the other 50% is just to food. And so that's one of the real strengths of our model, is our buying power and how far we can stretch each dollar. And so that is really one of our strengths. So that, between that and our volunteer workforce and low overhead, we are really able to do a pretty massive impact with pretty minimal resources. And but as far as state, federal level, it's been a variety over the last couple years. There's been years recently where we actually received several $100,000 from federal sources, particularly grants that either come through HUD or FEMA. And so that has more, but typically each year, I'd say around 10% or so of our budget is essentially at risk of being impacted by the current federal things going on. One of the emergency food and shelter program that is funded through FEMA is one of the first ones that we got notice of, hey, we're not going to be doing grant proposals right now. Unfortunately, they've been told this funding is on hold, and we'll let you know more when we know more. So we have already started to see some of that direct impact of some of those federal freezes, and we're sort of bracing for more down the road, probably this year and into next year. And so I'm sort of surprised that we haven't already been sort of overrun with lots of people in need, but we're sort of afraid that that's coming, so we're sort of bracing for that.
You told me you thought it was going to happen before the end of the year.
Yes, I did, and that is because our state and county tend to run on a fiscal year budget July to June, and so we'll know more in the next month what kind of cuts or effects might happen. But when the federal budget's on time, it tends to be an October to September fiscal year. And so I think this sort of trickling down of some of the things that have already happened and some of the things that are still to happen will not be felt really, I think, until later this year and into next year. And so, yeah, that's definitely got us a bit nervous. Yeah, I think that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Julie, the food bank is in an entirely different situation.
Yeah, so for us, I'll kind of go backwards from Phil's, just because since
Let's start with the total budget.
Yeah, well, I'm going back actually on the last thing he mentioned, just so then we can go up to the total budget, is that is true as far as upcoming budgets go for us as well. The state isn't until they have major, so far in their budget, they're proposing major cuts to major programs, which can be answered more in depth possibly in another question. But one of them is Cal Foods, which means purchasing California foods, and for the state it's been 60 million, and right now they're proposing it go all the way down to 8 million, and that's just at the state level. And funds like that are dispersed obviously based on size, county size, and those sorts of numbers. So with that but for us, instantaneously, within a week or two, there were all kinds of cuts that cuts and changes and holds that affected the food bank immediately. So one was, as lots of people probably saw, it was $500 million cut to USDA, and it mentioned like schools. Well, that is also funding we get because we're through the USDA. Food banks actually, even though it's a social service as far as the federal and state level, food banks fall on the USDA agriculture side. That's where food banks basically came from. Was many decades ago, they just, during a recession, they came up with the idea of let's pay our local farmers. So then that way we're putting the money back into our system. We're generating this growth, we're generating jobs, we're putting people to work, and then we purchase back that food, and then we're able to give it to food banks, which then again, so it's making that same money work exponentially for the good of the people. And so, so all of those, so the food bank falls under that category, and so that's where people heard of USDA commodities. By the age of most people in here, block cheese, even though we don't get block cheese anymore, but you know, that used to be the stigma with it, that we still get all kinds of different foods for that. So almost instantly they did that $500 million cut, and that was a cut, not a cut to a budget. That meant the program completely. So it affects our farmers, it affects jobs, and affected us immediately in that way. Then since then they have put everything else either has been cut or is on an indefinite pause, with not the explanation is not until we work it out. It is possibly forever and indefinite, and so that includes, which I'm sure you've seen, it's like 300 $1 million worth of food deliveries, so we get them of the commodities. All of those have been put on hold. There's at least 8 to 10 states who the entire USDA commodity program, it's called TFAP, the Emergency Food Access Program, has been on hold, meaning no food or funds that go with it. And so that's instantaneous. What it did to us instantly was, just right off the bat, was $1 million of money that we partially already spent or that I had ordered for upcoming food within that money, gone, just like that. So not even including, that's without including what's coming up for the next budget statewide and federal wide. And so just instantly, so we no longer get milk, eggs, produce, butter, any of the things. And so basically those are your core components of a distribution that you want to hand out for the health to be nutritionally dense. So, so it has definitely left us scrambling. Also, we had some other great grants on the side that were large that we were able to, again, came down on the USDA agriculture side, that allowed us to pay local farmers, so not just buy their produce, to actually invest in them. So they were small disadvantaged farms, and you could pay them value. So it wasn't trying to get a food bank deal like we normally do. You know, it was at value for their products, so that again we're putting that money directly back into our immediate community. We're providing jobs, we're providing some sort of sustainability for people, for the food system. And that was $700,000, not included in the first $1 million. And so, and it took directly from, so not just the food for the people at the food bank, it took directly from the money going into our county and to the people that it was supporting and jobs. And so, so all that has already happened. And so, and there's still more to come. Fortunately for us, the food bank was originally started almost 40 years ago now, and was based on community. That's where it started, community donations, food and financial. we get, as far as for operating costs go, we get about 90% is, for our operating cost, is funded by local donations, not even businesses, local people donations. And then the other 10% is subsidized, maybe because it's less than 10%, is for operating the TFAT program. So in that avenue of grants and money, they just give you a small amount, but basically so that they can make sure that you're taking care of their food appropriately, meaning, at the right temperature in a refrigerator if it needs to be, and storing it. And so that's where our funding in that way goes. So if we lose all of that, we are fortunate. We actually do get our food sources from very different locations, and so we bring our food in from out of county unless we're purchasing it. Then we only purchase it in county. We bring our food, so that's why we need all the trucks to bring the food in, and then to also be able to get it out to the different organizations. And so, and we don't get store donations, so we don't get the food that the stores donate after their sell by, or what they deem, to donate. So we don't pick up those donations. For us, because they do multiple a week, we do as well, but the volume is too small. So the amount of resources we would use to gather the usable resources. So we deal in pallets. We have 3 warehouses, and we deal in pallets, and that's how we get those. And so we're fortunate in that way that the majority of food, other than a couple of those core staples, is based on donation. So I basically spend the majority of my time trying to procure large amounts of nutritionally dense food and items. And so that's where that comes from. We have gotten some very large grants over COVID, through different things, and through FEMA for responding in emergency situations with the fires and COVID and all sorts of different things as well. But we have also been fortunate enough to get quite a few other grants that came down, like capacity, which allowed us to purchase basically most of our resources outright. So we own all of our trucks, we own our buildings, we own a forklift, and pallet jacks and those sorts of items. And so those grants, so I have to say the government grants are different from the USDA ones, but other government grants are very specific about what you can spend the money on. So it's not like, here, this, and do the best you can with it. It's very specific, like, okay, you said you could buy a forklift for $40,000, here it's $40,000, and it does not include admin fees, if anybody's familiar with grants and how that works. A lot of times grants have admin fees. None of the government ones do, so that we've received. And so that's how we were able to do that. So again, another fortunate thing coming into these big cuts is we're not trying to pave the roof over our head. We're just trying to continue getting nutritionally dense food and getting it out to those who need it most.
So I looked at both your tax returns. The last ones available are from 2023 because your 2024s aren't due until October. So looking at 2023, $1 million. Yours is 6.1 million of 2023, and you're saying 90% of that came from individual donations? I don't understand.
Think you looked at ours. Ours wasn't ever 6.3.
Really?
And so and so it would have been our highest one was maybe $1.5 million, and that was because of purchasing the building. And so that's not our operating budget, and so really, which would have been at least a year ago, so
I'm
kind of for 2 years,
2023.
And so,
So
So
of
those-
the, what is your normal budget then? And 90% comes from individual
Yeah.
donations? I'm trying to figure out where it comes
So
from,
previous
so that I can ask how hard are
Yeah.
you gonna be hit by the federal
Yeah.
and state cuts?
Yeah, so the previous years, the one we're working in is different, but the previous years, ours was 650,000 was our annual operating budget. And so anything above that that came in was like a grant for the building, meaning it doesn't go in our budget because we weren't gonna purchase it if we didn't have it anyways. And so 650, and that was for the last 3 to 5 years. And then this year, before pre-cuts, it went up to 800,000.
Okay, all right. I looked at, I guess,
Yeah, and yeah, it's grants, so grants are included with that, and grants being included with that, like I said, are things that we wouldn't purchase if we did not have the grant, so it's not part of the operating budget. Meaning, does everyone understand what I'm saying, like not trying to be shady? You know, when you buy a building, it can be $1 million. We didn't have $1 million, we didn't even have the money for the down payment unless, you know, we had the grant specifically.
so on a regular, let's say the last year when you're gonna
Yeah.
file this, like, okay, what revenues and how much of those revenues are now being cut? That's what we're trying to find out is, you know, what are we gonna do with these programs if they're not fundable, you know, if they are not funded?
So that's why the 700,000 for the farms, that was something, so we would have spent that on food. We spent, the last 2 years at least, we spent between $300,000 to $500,000 on locally in our county food purchases, and so that has stopped completely. So that we will be out that. Trying to think the other things, but the TFAP, so the small percentage, so that 10% basically of in between, that can contribute to operating costs. We're not getting that anymore. And so, yeah, other than that, as far as our operating costs go, I would say it's the biggest impact is food purchases and food and the money we put directly back into the county. And it makes a huge difference because of the what we can provide, the quality of the items we can provide, because we don't pick up from the grocery stores and we don't get donations from the grocery stores. And so for us, that is the biggest impact, is not being able to have those things like milk and eggs, and or even access to purchase it. And so that's a big part of.
And actually, it was Interfaith Food Ministry that had the 6.1.
That's probably because that includes donated food, and so the value of the donated food. And so when you look at our budget that our board is reviewing, and what it approves is just, you know, cash is financial, you know, that you have, you know, on hand and everything, and then versus donated goods and services is sort of another part of the budget, but that does go on our tax 990s as, you know, part of our annual revenue. And then it's interesting the way it's set up is everything is donated is in on revenue, and so that's why we're up in the millions for all the food that we get donated through the grocery stores, and food that's donated to us from the Food Bank of Nevada County. Another one of our biggest sources is Feeding the Foothills, which used to be Placer Food Bank down in Roseville. They're more of a regional food bank, and so we purchase food from them, but then they also donate food to us. So all of that food has the dollar value that goes into, so that's why it is important to understand sort of some of the nuances to how the budgets are structured. But yeah, for us, it's pretty you know, dry, cut, clean. We're about $1 million that we try to bring in fundraise, because we're expecting to spend $1 million on our staff, operations, and buying food. And basically, I would estimate over the last several years, some years being larger, some being smaller as far as the federal amount for a source of funds fluctuates, but on average about 10% or so of what we're, you know, operating with is what is most in danger of being immediately impacted by some of these federal cuts.
Yeah, I agree. That's the difference. So that is
Yeah.
perfect. So him and I were both speaking of operating budgets, meaning what we have to keep the door open and give out the food if it's donated. For the purpose of the 990s, you have to put a value on all donated goods and services. And there's a line right on it for when everyone looks, and it says in-kind donations. And so when you're a food bank, it does, because they also get to claim the value of what their shelf price is. And so that also inflates the value as well, but we both gave our operating as far as.
Okay. So you've also talked to me ahead of time, challenges, not just financial, but living in a rural area and going to North San Juan and everywhere else, the volunteer pool. You'd welcome bags even, that's how desperate, if we can use that word. And then your infrastructure limitations, warehouses and the refrigeration in the vehicles. And Phil, you talked to me about the rising costs and supply shortages and decreased donations, and you even named bird flu as a problem. It seems like the odds are stacked against both of your organizations. Where is the money gonna come from and what's gonna happen?
That's a great question that I wish I knew the answer to. The odds has been stacked against us. I mean, it was tough. I remember in the years before COVID, it was tough. And then that made it even tougher in different and interesting ways. And since then, rising inflation has really been an issue. And then now the current administration and current uncertainty going on at the federal level is just another thing to add on. And the bird flu, started last year, and that means that, we basically had to stop buying eggs, which is one of the top, we're doing client surveys all the time, and that's one of the top 3 requested items when we ask people for what they, want us to see us distribute. And so, that's been a challenge. And and the supply chain issues I think is a big one. As we all have seen the shortages and rising prices in the grocery stores, that just doubly impacts the food banks and food pantries around the country because we're seeing less donations, less funding opportunities, our costs are rising, and the need is growing. And so, the only thing I can say is that what's amazing is that I look at our volunteers that continue to show up day after day, week after week, year after year. Many of our volunteers have been there for 30 years. And it's really just, I look at that resilience, and that's what my hope is for the community, for how we can come together. And these amazing people here that care about food insecurity is where it starts. And I'm confident that there is a cool, new, innovative idea out there that we could all do together or work together to improve. It just hasn't been brought to the table yet, and I'm looking forward to that. And so I think we're just trying to be as resilient as we can through these difficult times and just try to show up and be there and be consistent for our families that rely on us, and do the best we can with the resources that we have, and stay true to our donors and stay true to our mission, and I think it'll all come out okay in the end for sort of our organizations, but it definitely is a rocky road, and it sometimes is hard, but yeah, again, I look at around IFM every day, and then the people coming through receiving the food, and just how gracious and appreciative they are, and that's why we keep doing what we're doing.
We should plug your postal food drive tomorrow. But
Yes, there's
don't worry,
definitely
and
a postal food drive.
what else is going on?
I would like to add to the Phil's. Yeah, so there's lots of things that it's going to affect. So the thing that's going to affect us the most, I think, as a whole, is the fact that like for us, is we're not putting that. So we weren't just feeding 15,000 individuals a month. It was all the other things we're doing as well. And so when we get less money, we're putting less money back out directly into the community, less jobs, less purchases, less even waste management, the bill, all the things. And so as that decreases, that affects our immediate community, especially being so small and rural, and two organizations that put that much back into the community. That's a huge hit. And I think one of my biggest fears are, and probably Phil's as well, is that SNAP and Medicaid, and those are on the line as well for, at the minimum, just some cuts and smaller budgets. And SNAP does 10 times the amount of food than the food bank system. 10 times the amount of food than the food bank system. You go down by just a couple percent and it overruns the food banks that they can't keep up with it at all. That is just SNAP, and that is a small percentage. And if we have a smaller budget, and we don't have as many resources, and the grocery stores have empty shelves, so they're unable to donate as much. And in our case before we even got to that point was they're not able to sell in large quantities because they're keeping the product for their own shelves. It creates a real systemic problem of other cuts are going to continue to affect the food bank. And so obviously everything with food bank, or now you guys know USDA and agriculture, and the title, directly affects funding that we're able to get. But Medicaid, SNAP, Social Security, all these things that fall in a whole different category are going to have possibly disastrous effects on food bank systems as a whole, not just in our county, and that is a real concern. That's the concern that that we're dealing with. And so it's one of those, taking it a day at a time and getting what we can for our friends and neighbors and for this community. But I do agree, it is going to grow. It is going to, and it's growing. The need is going to grow, and it's happening inversely, meaning every time the need grows, that's one less person or family that's contributing to an organization that's working. I think time is working against us this year, more so than has even in the past with COVID. And so potentially, like I said, it could be disastrous, but we're hoping, taking it a little, few chunks at a time that we're able to. But I know we'll still be able to stay open and do what we can for as long as we can, because we've both been here decades.
I wanted to leave more time for questions. Maybe we have time for one from the audience. Does anybody have a pressing question? Yes.
I don't have a question as much as I'm here representing Sierra Harvest, and we have a gleaning program. So if you are a homeowner and you have vegetables, fruits in excess, we will come and pick them. And we bring them to the food bank, and it goes out to the community.
For those who couldn't hear, Sierra Harvest has a gleaning program. If you have a home, farm, or garden, they'll come out, pick them, and donate them to either of these organizations. Any final words from either one of you?
Thank you all for being here, because we need more awareness about this. So your homework to take away with you is tell 10 people about this amazing presentation that they missed and that you were fortunate enough to be at. And so please tell at least 10 people about supporting a local organization that is concerned with nutrition and food and our neighbors not being hungry. It's actually something that I think is solvable and achievable, to have a local food system that is resilient and can withstand these outside pressures that happen and disruptions. And I think that is achievable, and it's going to take people in this room, like this, people like our organizations, and it takes the folks that are not here, and it takes the youth and the older generation and the middle generation and all of us to, tackle this together. And so I think in times of, adversity, there's opportunity to do something new and cool and even better than what was before. And at IFM, we're trying to do that. We switched to drive-through during COVID with more recent impacts and our lines getting longer and longer. We implemented a reservation system. And so we're actually letting people virtually wait in line so that they can just come and be there for the 20 minutes that they need instead of waiting in line for an hour and a half or more. And so we're trying to serve with dignity and trying to do the things to lift people up, not only through food, but through hope and dignity and respect. And again, I think it's achievable, and I encourage you to come down and see one of our food distribution events. They're really amazing things to be a part of. And come check us out. And we have paperwork over on the table, which was probably going to be mentioned, but and we'll hang out afterwards to chit chat, of course, too.
I can give you 30 seconds.
Sorry.
And plus, more information is available on both their websites, so.
Mine real quick would be advocacy, like you said, at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal. There's emails. I know people who do it every day, who email every day or who call every day, because it makes a difference. And so the California budget isn't set yet, and they have to rise up to make differences. And so that is the one tool that we can all do, and we can all afford to do. Any simple act, from something from your garden, even a few items, to paper bags, help tremendously. And so those are ways you can help, and you can do something right now, and it will make have an impact and make a difference. And last is donate directly to the cause that you want to donate to. That's kind of the platform I'm on. When you donate at the register, which is great and convenient, but all of those things have platform fees and that they have to pay, and it gets diluted, and it may not be going exactly where you think it is. So not even just for food causes, for whatever it may be, is I suggest, you wanting to keep it in your community, is give your money directly to that organization. And so I would say that's my, because we all depend on the community support to keep it going.
Good advice. Phil Alonso and Julie Thornberry, and thank you all for joining us today.